problem with using the antibiotics in the chicken is, one, it decimates their microbiome, which probably has a lot of downstream effects for both infection and production. And two, it can cause the proliferation of antibiotic-resistant organisms. And these antibiotic-resistant organisms never stay on the farm where they're generated. They get into the environment and they can affect environmental health in negative ways. And they almost always find their way to humans. And they can cause resistant human infections that are difficult to treat. And they can also transfer their genes to the organisms we're already hosting and make more resistance in humans based on chicken antibiotic use.
Welcome to the Poultry Podcast Show, brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm Doug Corver, dedicated to bringing you the latest insights and discussions in the poultry industry. Get ready to expand your knowledge and stay ahead with today's episode. If you find this interview interesting, please let us know by visiting our website at wisenetics.com. Our guest today is Dr. Jennifer Ronholm. Jennifer obtained her BSc in microbiology from the University of Waterloo in 2007 and her doctoral degree in microbiology and immunology from the University of Ottawa in 2013. She completed postdoctoral training at McGill University and at Health Canada. Her interests are primarily in understanding the role of the microbiome in determining susceptibility of individuals, both human and agricultural animals, to infections. And she's currently associate professor at McGill University. Welcome to the program, Jennifer.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. So I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be a two-part interview. So if you are listening and you want to hear more on Jennifer's work in the microbiome and in One Health, please stay tuned for both episodes. So can you tell me a little bit about your career path in microbiology?
Yeah, so I'm a classically trained microbiologist. I started out in my PhD studies working on food microbiology and foodborne infections. And then interestingly, I took a postdoc in astrobiology, which is, trying to figure out ways to look for microorganisms on Mars and other places in the atmosphere. And that, it's similar to food microbiology in that you're looking for a very small organism in a very big environment. So there was a link there. I did a postdoc at Health Canada, and then this job opened up in agricultural microbiology. So I ended up working more with chickens and pigs than with Martian biology, but it's been interesting.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a switch there, going from astrobiology or microbiology to agriculture. So has it been a smooth transition? Is it something that your excitement or your passion for the subject makes it a good transition or an easy transition?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all just about bacteria and microbes. So whether they're in the Arctic or on Mars or in a cow, they're still bacteria doing basically the same things, trying to eat and breathe. It's all very similar.
Probiotic International is driven by innovation, inspired by nature, and passionate about contributing to a more sustainable, safe, and healthy food system. We work closely with our customers to deliver solutions to current and future challenges facing the animal production sector while using natural active ingredients such as chenotypes and polyphenols derived from plant extracts and spices. Our products follow a rigorous scientific validation process. They are then proven to work through thorough field research, certified for quality, and then brought to market as a complete and effective solution. In a world filled with rapid change, let Probiotic International deliver your opportunities for solutions and savings to your program. Innovation is in our nature. Visit probiotech.com/EN for more information.
Yeah, so looking at your program at McGill University, you've got a pretty diverse portfolio in terms of agriculture. So how did you get involved in working with the chicken microbiome specifically?
Yeah, I think the chicken microbiome is actually interesting from a lot of different perspectives. So there's a lot of organisms in there, many of which we don't know much about, and many of which we can't culture in the lab. So it's hard to try and learn about them. But at the same time, the chicken microbiome can play host to some really interesting bacterial pathogens. I mean, you have good E. coli that seems to keep the chicken healthy, but you also have avian pathogenic E. coli that makes them sick. You have Clostridium perfringens, which is almost always bad, and we try to keep it out of there. And then you have things like salmonella. And salmonella in chickens is just so interesting because you have like the ones that can make humans sick but seem to be okay with the birds, and then the ones that make the birds really sick but don't really come to humans very much. So it's just a really interesting mix of bacteria in a chicken microbiome.
So when we talk about poultry production, and we're going to talk about One Health in our next interview, but the big question that the general public has is related to antibiotic use. So can we talk a little bit about how antibiotic use in the poultry industry can potentially affect the environment or animal health or human health? I mean, that's a big topic, but...
Yeah, absolutely. So, Canada's doing pretty good in terms of antibiotic use. We've cut out the use of most important antibiotics unless there's veterinary oversight. Some countries, like Scandinavian countries, are still doing much better than us. But the problem with using the antibiotics in the chicken is, one, it decimates their microbiome, which probably has a lot of downstream effects for both infection and production. And two, it can cause the proliferation of antibiotic-resistant organisms. And these antibiotic-resistant organisms never stay on the farm where they're generated. They get into the environment, and they can affect environmental health in negative ways. And they almost always find their way to humans, and they can cause resistant human infections that are difficult to treat. And they can also transfer their genes to the organisms we're already hosting and make more resistance in humans based on chicken antibiotic use.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Typically, the growth-promoting antibiotics that are used in poultry production are different than those that are used in human medicine. So can you talk a little bit about what the concern is there if we're using different antibiotics?
So I think the big one in chickens that we use in Canada, and they still use in Scandinavia even, is the ionophores. And the ionophores aren't used in human medicine because they're toxic to human cells. So we're probably never going to need them in human medicine because of that toxicity. But at the same time, when we use the antibiotics in the chickens, it can lead to potential or known negative consequences like co-selection. So a lot of the time, antibiotic resistance genes come together, and gene after gene after gene on a genome stacked together. And when we use ionophores, it selects for the resistance genes to ionophores. But oftentimes, right beside that ionophore resistant gene, there's something that's resistant to other antibiotics, or more than one, multiple antibiotics. And the use of ionophores selects for these in addition. We also know that ionophore stimulates horizontal gene transfer. So that's when one bacteria gives its DNA to another bacteria. So when we use ionophores, it encourages this, and that can potentially lead to the spread of antibiotic resistance genes that have nothing to do with the ionophores. It's just the spread of genes. We also know that ionophores can go through the chicken's body and be excreted in their feces, and that gets spread environmentally. And these molecules can persist in the environment for a really long time. So even independent of the chicken farm, it can still be co-selecting, and it can be still encouraging horizontal gene transfer well out in the environment. So, even though it's not the ionophores we're worried about, they can cause this whole host of negative reactions.
Yeah, that's interesting. So where is Canada at in terms of antibiotic use relative to the rest of the world?
I don't think we're the best in the world, but we're close to the best. We're not at the end of the pack. So in Canada, it's really common to use ionophores. It's somewhat common to use bacitracin. Neither one of these get used in human medicine. So we're pretty good with that. We do allow the use of antibiotics in poultry that could be used in human medicine, but only under the supervision of a veterinarian, and only for chickens that we know are sick. We can't use it for disease prevention. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, they're all a little better. The only thing they really use are the ionophores, and Norway is trying to phase out even the use of ionophores. That being said, in most African nations, you can use what you want, often not under the supervision of a veterinarian, and often the washout periods are not even obeyed. And it's hard to tell what happens in Asia a lot of the time, but we're probably a little bit better than that as well.
Antibiotic use in most countries, there's at least a token approach to reducing antibiotic use. And in Europe, that's been done through legislation. That hasn't been the case in Canada and the U.S. So what's the approach being taken in Canada or the United States?
Well, I think in Canada, a lot of the agricultural associations play a strong role in reducing and encouraging their membership to reduce the use of antibiotics, and that's great. I think one of the strengths and one of the advantages that the Scandinavian countries has is that they have a very supportive population. Like they have a population that's willing to say, I'll pay a little more for, this antibiotic-free chicken, this antibiotic-free egg. And, there's a lot of cultural and societal reasons for that. But I think that's something Canada could emulate. I think if we had more public outreach describing the importance of this, we might be able to get there as well.
So has Canada seen a decline in the use of antibiotics with their approach?
Over time, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So do you see us moving completely away from growth-promoting antibiotics at some point?
I don't think we're using too much growth promotion. I think most of our antibiotic use is in disease prevention at the moment, but I agree the line is blurry.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Poultry Podcast Show presented by WiseNetics, please remember to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family. You can also set notifications to on from our channel so you don't miss any other upcoming episodes. And as always, please feel free to leave us your comments at any time. Your feedback is important to us.
Evonik Animal Nutrition is committed to ensure food security and safety while reducing the ecological footprint of animal farming. Its products and services use evidence-based solutions that seek to promote animal welfare and reduce reliance on natural resources. All this is underpinned by long-standing industry partnerships and deep customer understanding. Evonik's focus on efficiency, sustainable, healthy nutrition, and collaborations with livestock farming partners creates value for customers and consumers.
Looking at moving forward, what do you think the next steps are for the Canadian industry?
Well, I'd like to see additional products come online that encourage healthy bacteria and encourage a healthy microbiome to be established and persist in the birds. And I think we can encourage this in a variety of ways. We can recycle litter, but I think probiotics and probiotic products, and specifically multi-strain probiotics that maybe include an digestible fiber or an undigestible fiber, are really good ways of promoting that healthy microbiome that would encourage the disease resistance we're looking for.
So obviously one of the reasons that the growth promoting antibiotics were used was because they worked.
Absolutely.
So what's the downside of taking the antibiotics out? You talked about trying to maintain a healthy gut microbiome, but can you describe, if you take the antibiotics out and just don't do anything, what are some of the risks?
I mean, we know that there's higher mortality. We know that there's a bunch of diseases associated with antibiotics being withdrawn and no alternatives given: ursaculitis, foot pad burns. Mortality goes up by about 1.3%, which is huge if you have a huge flock. So there are definitely consequences, but there are consequences to keeping the antibiotics as well.
In your program, how do you approach the poultry field? So what specific things are you working on in order to address this issue?
Yeah, so we recently had a study where we looked very, very closely at the microbiome of 6 chickens, and these 6 chickens were taken from across Canada. And we really tried to define what a healthy microbiome was, and then we tried to collect organisms from a healthy chicken microbiome in order to, learn more about the interactions that these have with the chickens and each other, and try and build something that can really keep the problematic bacteria out. And I think something that people will find surprising is that we don't really know what a healthy microbiome looks like in people or chickens. Like, it's a very hard thing to define because it changes based on the location in the gut, and it changes based on what you ate that day, and it changes based on where you live. And it also changes based on what techniques we use. So we can look at it by, taking a fecal sample and growing it up in the lab, or we could take it by taking all the DNA out of that fecal sample and mixing it up and trying to pull it apart into different organisms again. We did this, and we isolated 1,200 different bacteria from those 6 chickens. And we did where we take the DNA out and try to put it back together again. And we actually found 545 different species beyond the 1,200 we already had isolated by doing the DNA. So it's interesting that the microbiomes are this big.
Yeah. So the question is always, is there a healthy microbiome, or is there an unhealthy microbiome, or is there one thing that we should be trying to avoid, or one thing that we should be trying to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest question to that is it's going to be different across the board, and it's going to be different days. So is there a healthy microbiome? Absolutely. Can we ever tell you exactly what that is? Probably not. I think one of the things that popped out to us was the importance of short-chain fatty acids. And these are hugely important in chicken guts, and they're hugely important in human guts. Short-chain fatty acids acidify the environment. They keep pathogens out. They help select for good bacteria. And they're also what your gut cells eat. So they lead to healthy gut cells. And one of the things that we're seeing is if you have a lot of bacteria in your gut that can produce these short-chain fatty acids, maybe you have a bit healthier of a gut. So we're trying to culture more of these. They're very hard to culture for the most part, but start building probiotics based on those.
One of the challenges with using probiotics, you mentioned multi-strain probiotics. So why is a multi-strain probiotic important?
Because each bacteria has good things about it and maybe some not so good things about it. So if you can match up a multi-strain probiotic, where each of the strains has different strengths, you can really make a nice strain, a nice probiotic product. In addition, a lot of the time bacteria work together. When we make yogurt for human consumption, we make it with 2 different bacteria that work together to make the yogurt. And I think probiotics are going to be like that, just a little more complicated because the gut's a little more complicated. So those multi-strain, I think, are the way to go.
Just looking at some of the probiotics that are currently available, I don't think we have a lot of multi-strain, or at least not complex multi-strain probiotics. What's the limiting factor?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We don't have a lot of complex multi-strain probiotics. I think it's just that we're kind of at the beginning of this. It's a new era. We still haven't phased out the antibiotics completely. The vast majority of the probiotics, if not all of the probiotics on the market, are just one specific type of bacteria, like it's the lactic acid bacteria or gram-positive bacteria. I don't think we've really even investigated the gram-negatives and the benefits they could offer for the gut. So I think we're just at the leading edge of this.
Are there some regulatory hurdles for developing a new probiotic that might play in as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Health Canada has a list of probiotic strains that you can use, and you can just use those at the moment. If you want a new species of bacteria to be on that list, there's a lot of regulatory hurdles. The good part is there's a defined pathway to getting recognized. You just have to stick with them to get through that defined pathway.
So some of the countries that you talked about earlier, the Scandinavian countries, the European Union, that have been dealing with the removal of growth-promoting antibiotics for a long time, are they further ahead than us in terms of developing multi-strain probiotics, or?
I don't think so. A lot of the probiotics are available in several countries. They do have a couple that aren't available here, but most of the strains that they have are available here. Like most of the same species of bacteria are.
A worldwide leader in animal nutrition, Adiceo's portfolio of products includes methionine, the full range of vitamins, enzymes, organic selenium, probiotics, mycotoxin management strategies, and palatability products. With such a diverse offering, Adiceo supports its customers with a broad range of expertise, tools, and services to help them maintain a competitive advantage. Adiceo, fueling predictable profits. To learn more, visit At a Sale at www.atasale.com.
So beyond probiotics, what are some other products or approaches, without naming names, but are there some technologies or strategies that producers can use in order to maintain a healthy gut microbiome in the bird?
That's an excellent question. Fiber is always important. We got to feed our microbiome as well as we can. And I'm sure everyone out there knows better than I do, but good management is always important. Like if you can keep your flock clean, if you can keep your flock healthy, they have higher resistance to infectious disease in general.
So looking forward, where do you think we'll be in, say, 10 years with respect to the use of antibiotics? Do you think we'll have achieved in Canada or in the US antibiotic-free, at least for growth promotion purposes?
I think we will. I'm not sure if we'll do it in 10 years. I think it kind of depends on our motivation. And hopefully we don't get any motivation to. But yeah, I think it's achievable. And I think it's a combination of having these probiotic products and, just continuing to build our industry to have best practices in terms of management and cleanliness and hygiene. And I do think it's achievable.
Well, thanks very much for joining us for part one of this interview.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that concludes part one of the Poultry Podcast Show interview with Dr. Jennifer Ronholm, presented by WiseNetics. Thanks for joining us, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcasts to stay updated on future episodes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review. Your feedback is invaluable to us. You can visit our website at wisenetics.com and learn more about all of our podcast segments for poultry, swine, dairy, beef, feed mill, crops, and even pet food. I'm Doug Corver, and I'll see you next time on the Poultry Podcast Show.